Hello again, it's Nikki Jones. This is part 2 of my 7th segment, and I'm going to start in 2016. In 2016, Josh and I, we had already started trying to have a fourth child. We knew that we wanted to expand our family at least one more time. And we had recently moved the month before, when I found out in April that I was pregnant with my fourth child. This one is a little harder to talk about because I lost this pregnancy. I was between 5 and 6 weeks, and so I think that it's pretty much considered more of a chemical pregnancy. But even if you look up a chemical pregnancy, it's just a very early miscarriage. I was between 5 and 6 weeks, and when I took my pregnancy test, I could tell that my hormone levels, there were lines there, but they weren't like what they were with my other 3 pregnancies, but you could tell I was pregnant, and I had never been that late before in my life, and so I knew I was, and so I thought, oh well, that was Tuesday, I think it was April the 15, 14, 13, it was the 12th, Tuesday, April the 12th, when I took my first 2 pregnancy tests, and I could see that they were positive. It wasn't as solid as my others. And so I thought, okay, well, maybe my hormone levels just need a little bit more time to get up. Well, I thought, well, let me wait a few more days and take some more tests. Well, I did, but you could tell they were there, but they were a little bit more faint. And not long after that, I started bleeding, and I knew that I was suffering an early miscarriage. And I had looked it up, and they said that's the way that a chemical pregnancy goes. Your egg was fertilized, and you did get pregnant. It just may have been trouble, I guess, in implanting or something, but I ended up miscarrying that pregnancy. And it was, I actually will tell you this, I did not talk about the pregnancy except with just a handful of people, maybe 4 or 5 people. I did not talk about it on Facebook, and I actually, it hit me really hard. I fell into a severe depression. I was scared to talk about it because it was a very early pregnancy loss. I felt like people would not understand that even though I didn't get to go to the OB and hear my baby's heartbeat for the first time because I had not made it quite to my 6th week yet, that they would brush it off and not understand. And so that's one reason I didn't talk about it. I feel much more comfortable talking about it now, and I feel like it's very important because some women, they do lose them very early, and they feel like their loss isn't validated. And I'm here today to tell you, I recognize your child, and I validate your loss, and your child's in heaven with God. And I just wanted to say that my due date would have been, according to my last menstrual cycle, it would have been December the 13th of 2016. That would have been my due date. And I had asked God, I talked to him a lot, and I had said, God, if it's in your time frame, will you please let me know if I had a boy or a girl. Josh and I had picked out names, a boy name or a girl name, for our fourth child. And I felt it was very important, and we sent up a balloon uh, to just acknowledge our child. And I thanked God for the even though it was a very short time, I still thank God for that sweet child that I had the privilege and honor of caring for, even for that short time. And I know that that child is waiting for me in heaven, and I will one day be able to embrace that child and tell how much I love him. But I will admit there were times I got impatient, like, oh, please, God, please let me know if it was a boy or a girl. And then it got busy because during November and December, those are busy months with Thanksgiving and Christmas, and kids getting breaks from school. And I didn't think about it. December the 13th came, and I was fixing to go to sleep. I was decided to have some read my Bible, and I was in Genesis. And if I remember correctly, I had read first, I was in Genesis chapter 29. I finished reading in Genesis 29, and I honestly felt the Holy Spirit tell me, keep going, keep reading. And so I did. I started Genesis chapter 30. And for those of you that know, Jacob was married to Leah and Rachel, but and he also had children with Bilhah and Zilpah. But Rachel, his wife, for a long time, she could not conceive children, and but God blessed her womb, and He blessed her with two sons, Joseph and Benjamin. Well, I was reading, and I got to Genesis chapter 30, verse 22 through 24, and God revealed to me that I had a son, and the name that Josh and I picked out was Benjamin Joseph. And I know it was no coincidence that we named him Benjamin Joseph. Let me read you Genesis chapter 30, verses 22 through 24. Then God remembered Rachel, and God listened to her and opened her womb. And she conceived and bore a son and said, God has taken away my reproach. So she called his name Joseph and said, the Lord shall add to me another son. And Josh and I had specifically been asking God for a son. Our oldest daughter especially wanted a little brother. And it really spoke to me. Joseph, the name Joseph, literally means he will add. Well, Rachel's second son, God promised Rachel, a second son, and she named him Benjamin. And my son is Benjamin Joseph. And I felt the holy presence of God, just heavy, in my room that night, confirming that my fourth child is a boy, and he's part of my great cloud of witnesses, and his name is Benjamin Joseph, and that he would add to Josh and I another son. And I felt his presence heavy the next day. I was driving down the road, and I just felt him confirm, you do have a son, Benjamin Joseph. And so it just blessed my heart so much. Well, Josh and I, what I did not know was the month that I found out that my fourth child was a boy. I conceived a fifth child. And I found out in early January that I was pregnant. And this time I did have solid lines. I'm like, oh, God's answering our prayers, and we're going to be able to have this child. And I felt really good about the pregnancy. And I went in during my 6th week, and the baby had a strong heartbeat. The baby's heartbeat was 162 beats per minute. And the ultrasound lady knew that I had had an early miscarriage. And so she was excited for me, and she felt, oh yeah, you're going to, this is great, a great sign that you're going to have a healthy pregnancy this time. You're going to have this baby. And so I went till almost 10 weeks thinking everything was going to be okay. And then it was at 9 weeks, 5 days, I started spotting. And it did scare me. I started to spot. I laid down, took a little rest, got back up. I was still spotting a little bit. And so I decided to call my OB's office. I took a quick shower, and, excuse me, I had to wipe my nose. I'm sorry. They told me to come in, and so I did come in, and found out that my 5th child had went to be with Jesus about 2 weeks before. I was in almost 8 weeks when my baby stopped growing. According to when they were taking measurements, they got measurements at 7 weeks, 4 days, 7 weeks, 5 days. And my baby's heart had stopped during that time. Excuse me, I'm sorry. So I was devastated. I honestly, with that one, I felt like I had lost my mother all over again. And it broke my heart. But this time I decided not to stay silent. And I talked about my pregnancy loss on Facebook. I felt it was important not to keep this one to myself. With this one, I was considered, my miscarriage was considered a missed miscarriage because my body wasn't registering that I had miscarried. In fact, I was still having pregnancy symptoms. I decided I would wait till the next week. My regular OB was not in that day when I found out that my precious baby had went on to be with Jesus. So I waited till the next week to see her, and waited to see if my body would naturally miscarry. Well, when I went in the next week, I had another ultrasound, and yes, it still showed my baby had passed away. And so I saw my regular OB, and she told me she definitely recommended a DNC, which I had already decided. The nurse practitioner that I saw the week before said, I'll give you 2 weeks to miscarry on your own, but if not, you need to go ahead and have a DNC so you don't risk infection. And I told her, I said, I don't know if I can wait that long, because it takes an emotional toll on you when you're still having pregnancy symptoms, but you know that your baby is already dead in your womb. And I said, I don't know if I can wait 2 weeks or not, because that's hard. It's really hard. And so I decided that I would go ahead and have a DNC. That was Monday when I saw my doctor, and I think I had that same week on Thursday, I went in to have a DNC. Thankfully, the procedure went well. I had minimal bleeding, and I had a quick recovery time. The only hard thing was that the nurses that were there to assist me that day, it was hard because the nurse was like, well, do you know why you miscarried your baby? And asked me that, and like, I'm like, I don't know why. I'm in the first trimester, and it hurt bad enough being there and saying other comments and stuff. But I mean, I thank God he got me through. But I was, and I had told her that I had other children, and then I heard her go outside in the hall and was talking to the other nurse about it, saying, oh, well, she has like 3 other kids, but she doesn't know why she miscarried this one. And I was like, you're kind of digging the knife in a little bit deeper and twisting it, but I forgive her. I mean, it's all good, but it just shows you why some people want to kind of sweep things under the rug, because things that you say can be hurtful to others, and so you just have to kind of, especially on when you miscarry a baby or have an infant loss, you have to be really careful and sensitive to the needs of the mom and family that lost that child. Anyway, I recovered well, and I went to my post-op appointment, and my doctor said she knew that Josh and I still wanted to try for another child, and so she said, just wait 3 menstrual cycles, and then you can try again. Well, we actually did, and I found out in June the 24th of 2017, at the age of 37, that I was pregnant again. This time I was cautiously optimistic, but as anyone that has suffered pregnancy loss, especially if you've had 2 back-to-back or multiples back-to-back, you are cautious, you're hopeful, but you are still nervous, and you don't want to set your hopes up too high, because you are still a little bit nervous that you may not carry this pregnancy. But, I had a strong faith in God, and I knew that He had promised me. I felt He had promised Josh and I a son and another healthy pregnancy. So we were just going to trust Him that we would be able to have a healthy child. And in July, and I purposefully waited a little bit longer because I was nervous to go in this time. I actually went in July, and I was almost 10 weeks when I had my first ultrasound, and I was scared because the day before I went in, I started spotting again. And I have been on 2 sides of the spectrum. With Sarah, I spotted a little bit, but I went on to have a healthy pregnancy. With my 5th child, but 2nd loss, I ended up having a miscarriage. A missed miscarriage, which required a D&C. So I was nervous. And I told the ultrasound tech, and she had been with me through that 2nd miscarriage and even knew about my 1st miscarriage. And so she was very kind to me, and she said, well, let's just see. And so she immediately found a heartbeat, and she said, look, there's your baby, and your baby's moving and has a strong heartbeat. And I said, what's the beats per minute? And she said 149 beats per minute. And then I noticed something. It looked like another edge of another sac, and I said, hey, what's that up there? And she said, wait just a second. She moved the probe up a little bit higher on my belly, and she said, oh, it's another one, it's a twin. And I said, what's the beats per minute on that? And she said 164 beats per minute. And I was so ecstatic, and God had given me a peace. When I got home, I felt Him say, you're going to have these babies, and they're going to be born healthy. And I was just so thankful. And then the funny thing was, my regular OB wasn't there that day, but I did send a nurse practitioner, and she told me it's common with multiples to have a little bit of spotting, especially if you're carrying multiples. And but everything looked good. I was trying to be a little bit more careful with this one because I was considered high risk. I had already had 2 miscarriages. I was over the age of 35, and I was carrying multiples. So, in conjunction to seeing my regular OB, I had to see a second OB and have more ultrasounds to check the babies. I delivered all my babies at St. Vincent's Hospital in downtown Birmingham, but I also was seen by a UAB doctor that would come to St. Vincent's and see women of high-risk pregnancies. I had also asked God to please reveal to me in His time what my second child that had miscarried, what she was, and by the way, my due date with my second pregnancy loss, fifth child, was September the 8th of 2017. Well, thankfully, God, He had heard mine and Josh's cries, and I was already pregnant with twins. On October the 5th of 2017, that's when I found out I was literally just, I think, 2 days away from being 20 weeks into that pregnancy when I found out that baby A, twin A, is a boy, and baby B, twin B, is a girl. And immediately when I found out that my twin B twin A was a boy and twin B is a girl, God revealed to me, I'm giving you back a boy and a girl. Your second child you lost is a girl. And Josh and I had picked names, a boy, girl, and a boy and a girl name. And God said, your second child is Miriam Ruth. We had picked the name Miriam in honor of and memory of my mother. And I love the Bible name Ruth. And so He's like, you have a Benjamin Joseph waiting for you and a Miriam Ruth waiting for you. And I know they're part of my great cloud of witnesses cheering me on in my Christian walk. And I know they love me and I love them. And I just felt God's presence and peace and comfort in that ultrasound room. And Josh and I had decided to name our son Joshua David, and our twin A, and our twin B, Alexandria Ruth. And Alexandria shares a middle name with her sister in heaven, which I think is very special. All of my children have at least one Bible name, and I love it. I did it that way because I want to honor God. I want to just dedicate their lives to God, and I want them to fulfill the God-given plan and purpose that He has for their life, because every child God has a wonderful plan and purpose for, and I just want to encourage them in their walk with Jesus Christ and just help be a godly parent. Josh and I want to be godly parents and help them, but anyway, I did end up having complications with that pregnancy. My due date with them was February the 23rd of 2018. And I ended up, my OB told me, she says, I don't mind inducing you with this one because a lot of times twins may come early. I don't mind doing a C-section on Groundhog Day when you're exactly 37 weeks. So we had scheduled February the 2nd of 2018. But my blood pressure had been acting up for a little bit. I don't know how many weeks, but I had been having to watch my pressure for probably the last month and a half. It would, even at home, I was watching it, and it would be like in the 160s, 170s for the top number, maybe 80s, 90s bottom number. And so I had to watch it really, really carefully, and I was getting very swollen, and I was getting to where I felt like my kidneys weren't, I didn't know it at the time, but looking back, my kidneys were not functioning properly. I felt the urge to go a lot, but I was hardly having any urine output. And so by January the 9th, the day before they were born, I gave a urine sample, and I had protein in my urine. And so I was admitted to the hospital for a 24-hour protein study of my urine. And by the next morning, they were like, yeah, you are definitely showing signs of preeclampsia or pregnancy-induced hypertension. And so I ended up having them via C-section on January the 10th of 2018. David was born at 8:15 a.m. He weighed 4 pounds 9 ounces 17 inches, and Alexandra was born 3 minutes later at 8:18 a.m. She weighed in at 5 pounds 4 ounces, and she was 17 and a half inches. They did have to spend 10 days in NICU, but they are doing fantastic. I am really thankful because God gave me a wonderful redemptive birth story. With my first C-section, it was very traumatic. With this one, I was in there smiling. I was able to see her hold them up. I was talking to Josh. I was able to have a conversation after they were born with them while they were sewing me up. I didn't have the dizziness. I didn't have all the nausea that I had. I didn't have, yes, my pressure had been high, but it went down in the hospital. I had it was a much more quicker recovery for me, because with my other one, because they had to get her out so fast, it took the incision, it felt like internally it took it longer to heal and that kind of thing, but it was just a wonderful redemptive birth story. And the cool thing was, my regular OB got to deliver my twins, and I told her, I said, you better be there for this one because these are my cabooses. And she even agreed. She told me that I didn't need to have any more children because it would be a lot harder on my body the more pregnancies I had, because I was pushing 40. I was already capable of having multiples. I'd already had pregnancy-induced hypertension, and so she's like, you don't need to have any more children. And so I said, well, this is just a wonderful way to end my pregnancy journeys. And God's faithful. He blessed me with a son and blessed me with another beautiful daughter, and we're just so thankful. And I did want to let you know that God can also minister to you through songs. With my first pregnancy loss, on 93.7 WDJC, I was really touched by the song that Hillary Scott wrote and sings, Thy Will Be Done. She wrote it due to her pregnancy loss, and it really ministered to me. And the cool thing was, the same year that I had, and the same month that I had my twins, Hillary Scott was blessed with twins herself. And I just think it's so wonderful because God blessed both of us. We had miscarriages, and He gave us rainbow babies. And with my second pregnancy loss, right as I was leaving the hospital, I was in the parking deck. I had just, found out that Miriam Ruth had passed. I was crying. I was physically crying, but I was also crying out to God. God, how am I going to be able to get through this, God? Please help me, God. And when I got in the car, the first song that came on was Even If by Mercy Me. They sing that song. And it's talking about God. We know He's able, and we know that He cares. We know that He can save us from certain situations, but even if He doesn't, we're still going to put our trust in Him. And it really strengthened my faith, because I'm like, well, God, I know that I don't know why I had these miscarriages, but I pray that You can work good out of some very sad situations. You can work them for my good and for Your glory. And I love, when I say that, the verse that comes to mind is Romans 8:28. And we know that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called, who are the called according to His purpose. And even though I did suffer the 2 miscarriages, I know I'll see my sweet Benjamin and my sweet Miriam one day in heaven. And I thank Him for the short time that I had them growing in my womb. And I just pray that my testimony with all my pregnancies will bring Him honor and glory. And I pray that it will touch other people people's lives and help strengthen their faith and grow their faith in God. And I thank you for listening to my testimony. And I know the second part was a little bit longer than I anticipated, but I just wanted God to speak through me. And I pray you all have a blessed day. And I will say I probably will have maybe one or two more segments, but I especially wanted to get this one in October because it is Pregnancy Loss and Infant Awareness Loss Month in October. And so I felt like I felt like God really laid it on my heart to do it this month. But I do pray that you'll all have a blessed day today, and I thank you for listening.